Okay, so we'll record this. So instead of doing our week 2, the judicial branch of the government and discussing civics and government and um, history like we have, let's diverge because there aren't any new people here. You two have heard that before. So even though I've said well, I won't, you know, instead of just going over the same stuff we've already discussed, let's talk about something new. So this can be interesting. Okay. Um, Olubukimi, thank you for logging in. I see you
Good
logged in
morning.
there.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, I came a little bit late.
That's okay. That's okay. We are going to do something a little bit different, okay? Because you three, Olubukimi, Guisha, and Jendaya, you've been with me for a long time. We've been studying for a while. So we are going to change course. We're going to change plans just a little bit. We're going to do this reading that I have on the screen, okay? And we'll read, we'll
Okay.
practice reading, we'll discuss it, okay? And this is a story, true, you know, this is obviously a true story. Um, from the 1950s, well, really 1957, I think. Okay. So it's, you know, it's still history. We'll talk about history. We'll talk about the judicial system. We'll talk about the court system. And, you know, it's still good to study American history here. As we do, let's focus on reading skills. Okay. So this starts with, you know, first, obviously, you want to read the title, okay, Integration of Central High School. And then it does start with an introductory paragraph. Now, I've highlighted terms and words and phrases that I think are good, what we call academic vocabulary. Okay, good vocabulary words, good things to know, especially in the study of social studies, or, you know, we're talking about American history. If you're going to be a good student of American history, these are good things to know. Okay, some of them are vocabulary words, and then some are just things. Some are, you know, historical things that I think are good to know. All right, so you know, it's a long reading. This is about 1,000 words. Okay. And I toss in some pictures, and we'll just take turns reading. We'll discuss it as we go, and we'll just, you know, ease our way through here. Okay. So this is going to discuss integration. It's going to discuss segregation in the 1950s. Now, what is, if society was segregated back then? What does that word mean?
Is separate.
Yes, separate. Okay. Now they're very similar words. Segregated has a G, segregated, but it is very similar to separated. Okay. Who was separated? 1950s, 1960s, even 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Who was separated in society?
I think the black,
Right. Yeah.
the black.
hmm Black Americans, white Americans. Okay. Now, this happened unofficially and officially. Okay. Even today, we see some, you know, some certainly sometimes people like to live around people like them, right? So you have in society, in cities and towns, you have people, um, you know, oftentimes immigrants will find ways to live together. And you have, and it just happens naturally, nothing wrong with it. People live with around in neighborhoods, people like them, right? And so you have neighborhoods that are a lot of black people. You have neighborhoods that are a lot of white people. That happens. Okay, maybe no big deal. Back then, what we're talking 1930s, 40s, 50s, society was officially segregated, which means, you know, you have restaurants where, you know, if it's owned by a white person, that restaurant won't serve black customers. You're not allowed to go in. You have the famous, you know what, let me Google something here. Let me see what we can do here. Let's just look at some images here. let's see what we come up with. Okay, so we see, and now, of course, back then they used the term colored. Okay. This guy's drinking from a fountain. It says for colored only. Let's see. Whites only fountain. So you have, okay, here's famous. This is a famous image. You have a white water fountain and a water fountain for black people. It says colored, white and colored. Which water fountain looks nicer? The one for white people or the one for black people? Which water fountain looks nicer in this picture? What do you guys think?
White one much better.
Yeah, and here's another picture, okay? And so you have, a town would set up, or this is maybe in a store or in a mall or something. You have water fountains, right? There's a water fountain for the white people and there's a water fountain for black people. And the one for the white people is much nicer. Like, look at this. This is a huge difference, right? Big, nice water fountain, probably cleaner, taken care of a little bit better. And the one for it says colored for black people, smaller, lower, not as nice. You have everything is separate. So things being segregated is separated. Okay. And that's, and so restaurants, movie theaters, there would be different sections for white people and black people. And every single time you're going to find the one for white people was nicer, right? Better taken care of, better everything. So that was the way the world was. That was the way America was through much of the middle of the 1900s. In the 50s, you have the civil rights movement, the American civil rights movement, saying where people stood up and said, "This isn't right." So you have sit-ins. Let's look at. Let me find something here. You have people doing sit-ins, where this in Greensboro. I think North Carolina. This is just a lunch counter, okay? And they would only serve white people. Now you notice that the guy working there is black, but this is a lunch counter where they would only serve whites. Like if a black person came up and sat, they would be asked to leave, okay? And so you have African Americans stepping up and saying, I'm going to go and I'm going to sit at this counter. It's called a sit-in. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to ask politely to be served. And so they would break laws because these laws were wrong, they were unjust, they were unfair. So they would break those laws and then they may be arrested. What tended to happen, so these four guys are, they volunteer, they walk in, they sit there peacefully and do a sit-in. Now, what often happened was a bunch of angry white people would show up and do stuff to them. Now, here you see white people and black people sitting together as part of the civil rights movement, and they're dumping sugar on their head, they're dumping ketchup on their head. These people aren't being beaten up yet, but quite often they'd be pulled out of the seats and beaten up, okay, as a way to protest the unfair laws. These people sitting aren't starting a fight. Other people may start a fight, but they would go in and they'd sit at the lunch counter peacefully just to show that the laws and the rules and the habits of society were unfair and unjust. So you have what we're going to study today, the integration of high schools. Schools were also segregated. So elementary school, middle school, high school, colleges were segregated. Colleges, not so much. Well, they were because you have historically black colleges and universities. So they have different schools for white people and black people, and some, integration, some mixing. But by and large, there were certain schools that if you were a black person, might as well not bother applying because you're not going to go there. Um, and so what they did was they made, what we're going to read about is they started to pass laws that broke down those walls between the white and the black, the white things and the black things. Okay, so that's what we're going to read about. Segregation, integration. To integrate means to mix into something. Okay, if I learn a new word and I want to integrate it into my speech, then I mix it in, I start using it more, right? So if I'm integrating people, if I'm integrating black people into a white high school, I'm mixing them in, I'm bringing them in, I'm making them part of things. Okay. So, maybe you've heard about this kind of stuff before, you probably have a little bit. That's what we're gonna dive into today. All right. So I'll read the introduction, we'll talk about it, and then we'll take turns, we'll read, we'll go through. Okay. So integration of Central High School. This is Central High School, a particular school called Central High School. It says, in a key event of the American Civil Rights Movement, 9 black students enrolled at a formerly all-white Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in September 1957, testing a landmark 1954 U.S. Supreme Court ruling. The court had mandated, as part of its groundbreaking case, Brown v. Board of Education, that all public schools in the country be integrated. However, on September 4th, 1957, the first day of classes at Central High School, Governor Orval Faubus, that's a pretty fun name, Orval Faubus, the governor, called in the state National Guard to keep the black students out of the school. Later in the month, President Dwight D. Eisenhower sent in federal troops to escort the Little Rock Nine into the school. They started their first full day of classes on September 25th. Okay, as an introduction goes, this isn't really introducing ideas to us. It's kind of telling us a little bit of the story, right? Doesn't really tell us if this is right or wrong. It's not making some profound statement of an idea. It's really just kind of giving us a kind of a sneak preview of the contents of this article, right? And I think, what would be the purpose of that? Why would the author start with this paragraph? We're going to learn all this in a minute, right? We're going to read those details. Why would you start with those some sort of general details?
I think, what do you want us to say something?
Yeah,
Can I?
yeah.
Yeah. I think why they started with that detail was because of the topic, integration of the black into the school.
Mm-hmm.
So why they started with that is just to give us the background of what was happening and
Yeah.
why
Mm-hmm.
and what's happened.
Right. So to give you a little bit of a background, right? So that you can, when I always say, when you started reading this article, you had no clue what it was about, right? You don't know if it's about the Civil War or space or elephants, like it could be about anything, right? So the introduction is just to get you into the topic. And so the author just gives you the general story, right? Kids went to school. There was a Supreme Court ruling. The kids had to go to school as part of an integration. It didn't work. So then the president became involved. That's the general story, right? It just kind of gets it in your head. Say, okay, this is what I'm going to be hearing about. Then in a minute, when we read on, we read some more details, and you can say, oh, I see. That now I understand the details of the story. So that's a good introduction strategy if you were writing an essay. Give the general idea, and then your essay fills in the details. Okay. So let's talk about things. We have the American Civil Rights Movement. Okay. I think we understand what that is. when it says a landmark 1954 U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Okay, every time when the U.S. Supreme Court in the Supreme Court in the judicial branch of government, when they rule, when they make a decision in a case, it's called their ruling, and this has happened. This particular ruling that they're discussing happens in 1954, and so what does it mean that it is a landmark 1954 U.S. Supreme Court ruling? And then it also actually calls it a groundbreaking case of Brown v. Board of Education. Means it's pretty important, right? Very important, a landmark, a groundbreaking. This is something new, something very important. The case Brown v. Board of Education, okay, in a Supreme Court case, the V means versus, right? So a person named Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas is what that's from, okay? So that's the name of the court case, Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. In that court case, in that ruling, they mandated. To mandate means to command something, right? They made it that the country had to integrate all public schools in the country. 1954, they said separate schools are not equal. Not they used to say separate but equal. Black and things were excuse me, that black water fountain and white water fountain are separate but equal. But of course, that's not equal. We saw the pictures of the water fountain, right? And if there's a white high school and a black high school, they're separate, but they're not going to be equal. So Brown v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court says separate but equal doesn't exist. So integrate the schools. You can't have separate black schools and white schools. That was 1954. Comes to 1957, 3 years later, and they're just getting around to doing this. Okay, so we're going to see a little bit of history here. Jendaya, could you read paragraph 2, please?
In its Brown against Board of Education decision issued May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation was unconstitutional. Until then, many states had segregation laws requiring African American and Caucasian children to attend separate schools. Resistance to the ruling was so widespread that the court issued a second decision in 1955, known as Brown II, ordering school districts to integrate with a deliberate speed.
Okay, so that just gives us a little more details. And this would be interesting to know a little bit more about this. 1954, you have Brown v. Board of Education. They say integrate American schools. Segregation was unconstitutional, they said. And then they come out the next year saying, with a kind of a follow-up, saying, hey, do this. Do it with all deliberate speed. Do it. Because nobody was doing it. Nobody was integrating. Nobody was mixing the schools. Okay. So it just gives us a little bit more background. Guisha, do you want to read a paragraph, or do you want me to read it?
In response to the Brown decision and pressure from the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Little Rock School Board adopted a plan for gradual integration of its school. The first institution in integrate would be the high school. Beginning in September 1957, two groups formed to opposite to the plan. The Capital Citizen Council, and the Mother Legal and Central High School.
Okay, thank you. So it says in response to those court decisions and pressure from the local chapter of the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, there was pressure. The Little Rock School Board made a plan to do it, to integrate the schools. But two groups formed to oppose the plan. Okay. This is in Arkansas. This is down south. Let's look at where Little Rock, Arkansas is. Let's look on a map. Okay. Little Rock, Arkansas is in the south. It's not in what we call the deep south, but it's in the southern United States. Let's see. Okay. Actually, it's really right in the middle of the country. Where did I lose it? Where's Little Rock? I think I lost it. Anyway, here's Arkansas. Okay. So it's around here. Not very close to Pennsylvania, but it's in the south. You know, during the Civil War, this would have been well, I don't know. Arkansas wasn't a state during the Civil War. So I don't think so. Maybe it was. Well, I don't know. But it was in the South, right? Where slavery would have been. So this is down south. There's plenty of racist people, and there's racist people everywhere, of course. But down in Arkansas, we see they make a plan to integrate the schools, and two groups formed to oppose the plan. So we're going to see people fighting against this movement to integrate the schools. Ola Wakimi, could you read paragraph 4?
Okay. Little Rock 9 recruited. Despite the opposition, 9 students registered to be the first African Americans to attend Central High School. Minnie Jean Brown, Elizabeth Eckford, Ernest Green, Selma Mothershell, Meba Patillo, Gloria Ray, Terence Roberts, Jefferson Thomas. Sorry, is that Jefferson Thomas? I want to ask a question, sorry.
That's okay.
Jefferson Thomas, is it the same Jefferson Thomas in the government?
No, well, you're thinking of Thomas Jefferson.
Oh.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is Jefferson Thomas. You're thinking of
Okay,
Thomas
that one was
Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I realized that name clicked.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, you're right. You're right. Very
Jefferson
close.
Thomas and Carlotta Walls had been recruited by Daisy Gaston Bates, president of the Arkansas NAACP. Bates and others carefully examined the students and determined they had the strength to face the resistance they would encounter. In the weeks before the start of school, they participated in counseling sections on what to expect when classes began and how to respond to hostile situations.
Okay, so that's an interesting detail, very interesting and crucial to the story. So these kids, and there's the names there, they were high schoolers. Okay, these are high school age kids, Black kids in Arkansas. They live in that area, so they're supposed to go to that school. But these aren't just the first kids to sign up. They did it on purpose. These are hand-picked, interviewed young people chosen to do this job, to go into the school as the first Black people in an all-white high school. Why were they so careful? Why were they so careful about choosing who those students would be?
I think why they choose those students, the people, why they look closely before they choose them was so that they will be the ones, they can withstand the hostile situation they are going to face, because it's not everybody that can withstand such situations. So they try to choose those people that they know that no matter what, they are not going to be broken, or
Yeah.
they won't really be affected with what they are going to face.
Yeah. No, it's exactly. They won't be broken. That's a good way to put it. They won't be broken. If you just, if you let the wrong kid, and these are kids, right? If you let the wrong kid do this job and somebody pushes him and then he fights back and starts a big fight, then that's what's going to be in the news the next day. A black kid starting a fight in the all white high school, right? So you need 9 perfectly behaved, intelligent, ready to go students who aren't going to fight back when they're pushed or shoved or yelled at or spit on, right? And so they also gave them training. It says in the weeks before the start of school, they participated in counseling sessions on what to expect. They were prepared, professionally prepared by this lady, Daisy Gaston Bates, and the Arkansas NAACP. These kids were hand chosen, interviewed, prepared to do this job. This is something, I don't have the courage to do, but these kids stepped up, and their parents, their families supported them in being the kids that we now call the Little Rock Nine. Okay. Jennifer, I saw you logged in. Thank you. Can you read paragraph 5?
Yes. On September 2nd, on September 2, 1957, Governor Favus announced that he would call in the Arkansas National Guard to prevent the African American students entry to Central High, claiming this action was for the students' own protection. In a televised address, Favus said that the violence and bloodshed might break out if Black students were allowed in. Federal Judge Richard Davis issued a ruling that disgregation will continue as planned.
Desegregation, right? So the schools were segregated. Thank you for reading. The schools were segregated, and so to integrate the kids, or you call it desegregation, to bring in those kids. So the desegregation. The governor of the state stopped it before it even happened. Right, first day of school, he calls in the Arkansas National Guard. Of course, the National Guard is a branch of the military that are part-time volunteers who are just ready to be called up. It's the governors within each state that can call up the National Guard. And so the governor calls in some, I don't know how many soldiers from the National Guard to stop those students from going to school. And the governor says, this is, I'm sure he said, I'm not racist. I want integration as much as anybody, I'm sure he said. But this is for their own safety and for the safety of the school. Danger and violence will follow if these kids go to school here. Okay. So it's interesting. September 2nd, we can kind of watch the dates here. September 2nd, 1957, first day of school. It's 2 days before the first day of school. The governor stops it before it even happens. Okay, so students turned away by state troops. The Little Rock Nine, these kids, the Little Rock Nine arrived for the first day of school on September 4th. 8 arrived together, driven by Bates, that lady from the NAACP. Eckford's family, however, did not have a telephone, and Bates could not reach her to let her know of the carpool plans, so Eckford arrived alone. One of the most enduring images from the day is a photograph of Eckford, notebook in hand, approaching the school as a crowd of hostile and screaming white students and adults surrounds her. Eckford later recalled that one of the women spat on her. The photo of Eckford was printed and broadcast widely, gaining national and international attention. And this is a famous picture. And I put it right here. Okay. She's here holding her notebook, walking to school because her family didn't have a telephone. This is the 1950s. Her family didn't have a telephone. She didn't get the message that they were carpooling and the lady was going to drive them all to school. And this is a famous picture. Here she is surrounded by clearly angry. Actually, it's all women right around her. Okay. Famous picture. This is her walking to school the first day. Again, let me remind you, this is a high school age, teenage girl. Kind of crazy. Okay. Paragraph 7. The Arkansas National Guard kept the Little Rock Nine from entering the school. Davies began legal proceedings, right? Legal proceedings is the process of a court case. Davies began legal proceedings against Faubus, and Eisenhower, the President Eisenhower, tried to persuade Faubus to remove the National Guard and let the students in. Davies ordered the guard removed, and the Little Rock Police Department took over to maintain order. The police escorted the 9 African American students into the school on September 23rd. So that's 3 weeks later, right? September 2nd or 4th to September 23rd, that's almost 3 weeks later. Through an angry mob of about some 1,000 white protesters. As riots began, the police removed the 9 students. The next day, Eisenhower, the President of the United States, Eisenhower sent in 1,200 members of the U.S. Army and placed them in charge of the 10,000 National Guardsmen on duty. Escorted by the troops, the Little Rock Nine attended their first full day of classes on September 25th. Okay. Now, I don't know the last time you went to high school or, went past your town's high school, but imagine this happening and you're just, say, one of the white students. However you may feel about integration, whether you like it or not, let's say in this scenario, your high school is crazy, right? It's in the national news for this happening. This is basically the first high school in the country to do this, or this is the story we remember as really the first high school. I don't know if it was actually the first high school, but because of this back and forth and the drama and the danger, the Little Rock Nine is the story we remember for integrating high schools. And so you see the President of the United States gets involved for the safety of these kids. Okay, but they finally get into class September 25th. Jendaya, could you read paragraph 8? Jendaya, you still there?
Legal challenges to integration continued. As Faubus said several times, he wanted the Little Rock Nine removed from Central High. Although several of the Black students had positive experiences on their first day of school, they experienced harassment and even violence the rest of the year. Platia was kicked and beaten and had acid thrown in her face, and Ray was pushed down a flight of stairs. The Army and National Guard troops remained at Central High for the rest of the year. On May 25th, 1958, Green, the only senior among the 9, became the first African-American graduate of Central High.
Okay, thank you. So that's interesting. One of them was a senior, and she graduated that, the end of that year, the end of that school year. So it says, although several of the Black students had positive experiences on their first day, it would be interesting to learn more about that, right? And I think a lot has been. I'm sure if you Google Little Rock Nine, these people became famous. They're older now, so they not all of them are still living, but I believe some are. You can find out more about their experiences. But the Army troops stayed at the high school daily for the rest of the year. It's pretty crazy. Guisha, could you read paragraph 10?
Okay. Aftermath, in September 1958, Faubus closed the Little Rock High School for the entire year, pending a public vote to prevent African American attendance. Little Rock residents vote 90,470 to 7,050 564 the integration, and the school remained closed. The rest of Little Rock Line completed their high school career by correspondence or at other high school across the country. Eckford joined the army and later earned her general education development diploma. Little Rock's high school reopened in August 1959.
Okay, thank you. So this is not a happy success story, right? The one student, who was that? Green, I forget her first name, graduated that spring. But then the next fall, school started, September 1958, the governor closed the school in order to prevent those kids, African American kids, and more Black kids from coming to the school. So they said, we would rather close our school than have Black kids come to it. So you can say Governor Orville Faubus of Arkansas was not a fan or a supporter of integration. He did it against his will. He did it only when the President of the United States got involved. And then the following year, he closed the school instead of integrating. So, we look at the Little Rock Nine as a success, and these are tremendously brave young people. But the town of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, or the school board, actually, well, they voted, right? 19,000 to 7,000. They voted to close the schools. That's not very good, in my opinion. So it's a mixed story. There's success and there's failure. It says several of the Little Rock Nine went on to distinguished careers. Green served as Assistant Secretary of the Federal Department of Labor under President Jimmy Carter. Brown worked as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Workforce Diversity in the Department of the Interior under President Bill Clinton. Patillo worked as a reporter for NBC. The group has been widely recognized for its significant role in civil rights history. In 1999, Clinton awarded each of them the Congressional Gold Medal. The nine also received invitations to President Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009. So the Little Rock Nine, these 9 kids, they're older now. I don't know how old they'd be. They're probably 70 or 80. They were, it's interesting, they were hand chosen to do this very dangerous task. They did it. The town of, city of Little Rock, Arkansas voted to close the schools instead of continuing integration. And then the schools reopened in August 1959, a year later. So it says they all went on to finish their high school careers either by correspondence, through the mail, or they went to another high school somewhere else. So there's success and there's failure. These are some pretty famous images. This one here, this is a famous painting by Norman Rockwell. This is not a painting of the Little Rock Nine. This is a little girl. But it says Norman Rockwell's painting, The Problem We All Live With, 1964, painted in 1964. It depicts Ruby Bridges, a 6-year-old African-American girl on her way to William Frantz Elementary School, an all-white public school, on November 14th, 1960, during the New Orleans school desegregation crisis. So this is the story of Little Rock, Arkansas, but this same, something very similar unfolded in many schools and towns and states across the country. through the 1950s and late 1950s, early 1960s. This is the story of integration, desegregation. So what do you guys think of this story? Is this new? What are your thoughts?
For me, this is new.
Yeah, you hadn't heard about this type of thing before?
No, first time.
Yeah.
Oh. It's been on the news. I think it's because of those little 9 little rockers that the blacks are able to go to the same school with the whites.
Hmm.
At least that was the start of the integration. And I think although we are still working on it as a nation, but I think it's better off now. It's a little bit better off.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we all know our society still has its problems, right?
Yeah.
But through the 1900s, 50s, 60s, what they were trying to overturn, in addition to racism and people's attitudes, racist attitudes, were racist laws. You know, we're not perfect today, but by and large, we have eliminated racist, openly racist laws from our cities and states and country. And yeah, they did that today. Today there are no high schools where it is officially illegal for a black kid to show up and ask for an education. There are racist communities and places where you don't see a lot of black people and white people mixing, and okay, but you know, this is an important first step. Now, I don't know that Little Rock, Arkansas was the first step, but we kind of look at it today as the first step. And it was a first step in that process, right? What else do you think? Any other thoughts? Is that a job that you think you could do, to be a high school kid? Think of yourself when you were high school age, teenager. Would you have the courage to go to that high school, be protected by Army soldiers?
That's a big risk.
Yeah, it is. It's
If my children, I don't think I have that courage to
yeah.
let them in. It's big challenge.
Yeah, and you think these teenagers, but yeah, you think of their parents. Their parents took a big risk. I mean, they could have been
Yeah.
shot on the first day of
Mhm.
school. Anything could have
That
happened.
was what I was thinking about, that the parents needs to be praised too.
Yeah.
Because if the parent, as a mother, I wouldn't want my child facing such situation, because you don't know if the child is going to come home dead or alive. Anything could have happened.
Yeah.
If the whites have decided to beat up the children and they kill them in the process, that's the end of the child.
Yeah.
And others continue to live.
Mhm.
So I don't know, the parents needs to be praised and recognized too, because of what they were able to say, okay, we stand for this. We're going to let our children do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is kind of the next level of studying. It would be interesting to interview. Now, I'm sure their parents are long gone, maybe, but it'd be interesting to interview their parents. Say, how did you make this decision? And it just goes to show, in the 1950s and 60s, we have the civil rights movement, and we could, people study that for a lifetime. There's all kinds of stories about things like this, parts of our society that needed to be broken down. You have Rosa Parks refusing to move on a bus, right? Breaking that rule. You have the sit-ins that we looked at the lunch counters, breaking that rule. And, and Martin Luther King Jr. as a leader in the civil rights movement, not arguing that, hey, you need to start a fight with somebody, but just it's called civil disobedience, breaking a law because you believe it's wrong. Now, these kids weren't breaking a law, right? They were following the law. They were trying to get the law followed, but still the same kind of thing. Be peaceful about it. These kids were chosen because the lady, the Bates lady, was confident that they could be peaceful and smart and keep their heads on straight. And that's, there's dozens and hundreds of stories like that across the civil rights movement. It's a really interesting time in American history. Obviously, it's still happening today. We're not perfect yet today. But it's interesting to read these stories. And it's interesting to, we could dig deeper into these individuals and their experiences on the first day of school, the second day of school, their parents' experiences. So I think that's the interesting part of history. And then you take yourself and you say, well, how would I react in that situation? Would I be good at that? It's fun to think about. Any last ideas about this?
I just it looks like this line kids only stays at school like the one semester, right?
Yeah, just that school year, just that year.
The green is only one, the senior year and graduate by the summer, right?
Right. One student, Green, graduated that year, and then the next year, the town elected to close the school.
Close the school. Looks that's what I think. They not stay there so long.
Yeah. No, and that's part of the story. That's really interesting. You have these kids with the bravery and the courage to help this law be enforced, and then the town voted and said, we don't care. We're going to shut the school down. We would rather close a school than have Black kids show up for an education. It's part of the story. It's not good, but it's part of the story, So, okay. Well, again, thank you for logging in. Again, this is what we could do, but I still want, when new students show up, I do want to go with my 4-week crash course of social studies. But you four are, students that have been with me in and out, and I think you have all heard what we were going to discuss today. And so I thought we'd do something a little different. This was fun. I think I like to zoom in. The purpose of my little 4-week crash course is that we talk about a lot of big things very quickly. And this gives us an opportunity to slow down, stop, and look at one little thing and talk about it. So I think it's fun. So thanks for logging in. We'll do it next week, and then the week after we won't do it because 2 weeks from today is Christmas Eve. So we'll be off next week, maybe, or no, we'll do class next week, Thursday, and then the week after that we'll be off, and then the week after that is New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. So I think we'll do class next week and then 2 weeks off, and then I'll log in after that. Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, any final thoughts? Any questions? Okay. Well, thanks for logging in, and have a great afternoon and great weekend, everybody.
You said we're going to have no class on Christmas Eve?
Right.
Of course.
Yeah, we'll talk next week, and then the 2 weeks after that are Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So we'll not do those weeks.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.